yeah, I think geomechanics is playing a more increased role. And then you throw in on top of it induced seismicity, and that really brings geomechanics to the forefront.
Hello, my name is Andrew Geary, and welcome to Seismic Sound Off, in-depth conversations in applied geophysics. In this episode, I speak with Doug Foster about the May 2018 issue of The Leading Edge. These special section articles highlight geomechanics, its integration with geophysics, and how it could help reduce induced seismicity and increase gas productivity. Doug Foster served as coordinator for the special section. Dr. Doug Foster received his Ph.D. in geophysics from Columbia University. He has worked as a research geophysicist at ARCO, Mobil, Phillips Petroleum, and as a senior scientist at ConocoPhillips. His career interests have ranged from wave propagation, inverse problems, and applied geophysics. He also taught as an adjunct professor in the physics department at the University of Houston and served as vice chairman of the Ultra-Deepwater Advisory Committee for the U.S. Department of Energy. Doug, thank you for joining me. I want to start with the basics. What is geomechanics?
What it is to me is that it kind of gives you the stress and strain conditions of the Earth, and that can be important in many aspects of the production of and development of hydrocarbon fields, because we need to know what the stresses are. We need to know, it has certain effects on the seismic wave propagation, all the way down to how much pipe they need to put in the ground to produce a field for 20, 30 years.
There is a lot of conversation around integrating geophysics and geomechanics. What are some of the benefits to this integration?
Well, it traditionally hasn't been very well integrated. But I think the benefits is that, like in seismic imaging, stress can induce anisotropic wave propagation. So waves will propagate different speeds at different directions, and this can be related to stress. And so I think there's a strong coupling between these two. In terms of in field development, it's always important to know what the stress conditions are for drilling and completion technologies. And geophysics can play a role in that, if we link the seismic observations to the geomechanical stress model stresses.
Has the necessity to understand geomechanics, especially for geophysicists, taken on greater importance with the rise of unconventional resources?
Yes, I think so. But, geophysics is somewhat struggling to get an inroads into the unconventional resource play. I've been out of the business for about 3 years, but I didn't see much impact. The microseismic work was kind of confusing at times, but sometimes useful. And so I would say that since the unconventional is largely about optimizing drilling and completions, I think geomechanics is playing a more increased role. And then you throw in on top of it induced seismicity, so that really brings geomechanics to the forefront.
That's a good segue into one of the first papers I wanted to discuss. In Terhej et al., they used 3 geomechanical approaches to support reducing induced seismicity in the Netherlands. I was wondering if their findings associated with depletion-induced seismicity had relevance for reducing those occurrences, say, in the United States.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it's probably a pretty porous rock, so it's going to compact quite a bit. I mean, you see this north in Norway, like in Valhall and Ekofisk, where it's a chalk reservoir where it's actually it's compressing and contracting the rock, and you see the subsidence on the ocean bottom and depletion of the reservoir. In the U.S., I would say the most likely place you'd probably see that would be in the Gulf of Mexico. In terms of unconventional, I don't think it would be should have a big impact there.
You also had mentioned microseismicity earlier, and two papers highlight that relationship between geomechanics and microseismicity. What is this relationship?
Well, geomechanics, within the geomechanics, they have certain laws that dictate when rocks fail. And there's a variety of them. And so basically, it's hard to predict when a rock will fail. But there are certain criteria that are related to stresses, both the translational or deviatoric stresses and compressional or principal stresses. And that's kind of where the link is that you have at some point, if you have failure in a rock, you'll get a microseismic event or any seismic event, whether it's earthquakes or induced in fracking and whatnot. But that's kind of the link. It's really based on a certain kind of stresses, the rock will fail. And that attempts to predict that failure. And then as seismologists, we look for the seismic waves, but it's largely due to some imbalance of stresses.
What led G et al. To conclude that it was overpressurization in shale that might be a key to finding higher gas productivity?
Well, it was interesting. I guess it's hard to say. I'm not sure. It's kind of a conjecture in my mind, but it's interesting. What I do know when I was in the business is that what works in one unconventional play doesn't necessarily work in any of the others. So I don't know if this is kind of a one-off empirical observation or generally. And I've heard this kind of similar talk in the Eagle Ford. It's largely driven by porosity, which is can be related to pore pressures and things like that. So abnormal pore pressures. But I thought it was an interesting observation. I'm still kind of scratching my head on it, though.
What did you take away as the key insight in Maharamov and Zobak's paper that was looking at surface reservoir monitoring to infer reservoir conditions?
That was interesting as well. It's something I really hadn't thought about. They're doing tilt measurements, some changes on the elevation of the surface to infer pressures in below. I guess it was a steam injection, wasn't it, for part of the tar sands? And I thought, it seemed like an interesting approach. Again, it's something that I think it's kind of a new idea, and so you kind of have to see how it works out. But it's a different sort of measurement. We're always so focused on seismic data, but there's other things. So I thought it was kind of interesting, and it's hard to say how viable it will be in the long term, but I think it's something that people ought to look into.
Yeah, it's always nice when papers can get you thinking about something you hadn't considered or thought that deeply about. Outside of the subjects that were discussed in this special section, did you expect kind of certain things to pop up in the articles, or are there other topics you would like to see explored if this special section comes up again?
Before I retired, I was working in salt imaging, and I always thought geomechanics would be a good place for that. And we did some work internally on that. I think the stress fields around salt, where to go salt, can be quite variable because the properties between sediment and salt, physical properties are quite different. And so we saw some uplift in salt imaging using stress-induced anisotropy. And so I think that's an area that I think would be good to pursue. I think the whole idea of incorporating geomechanics into seismic analysis is a good idea. I think, for one, we know that stress plays a role in altering rock properties. And we're always studying how waves propagate through these materials, and stress will alter the velocities or the propagation speed of the waves. And so it seems like it's a natural fit. I think where it might be the most beneficial is maybe in time-lapse application. You have repeat seismic measurements, the stress fields are changing, the depleting reservoir, And I think that that would give a lot more insight into how the reservoir is basically breathing. And so I think it's a good topic, and I think it should be expanded.
How do these papers that are present help geophysicists improve the probability of them being successful, be it in exploration capacity or even trying to reduce induced seismicity?
Well, in terms of induced seismicity, I think, some attention needs to be paid to that. I mean, you look at the earthquakes up in Oklahoma, my God, it's just amazing how, the increase in seismicity, if you look where they're injecting wastewater. And so I think that would play a key role. And I grew up out west, so earthquakes are kind of not that uncommon to me. But I can understand how people would be upset by feeling the ground shaking due to, man-made problems. In terms of, in general, I think that I just think this is a good topic to be involved in. Because it seems to fit nice, What is a seismic wave? It's a stress field propagating, and it's just a natural fit. So I think overall, the combination of geomechanics and seismic analysis should be good.
What do you hope readers of this special section take away?
I hope they take away that these two, geomechanics and seismic analysis, are coupled. We can ignore the geomechanical part and just treat it purely seismic. And I hope they take away the idea that no, this has a role to play, not just in induced seismicity or whatever, but it has a role to play in the analysis of seismic. And it sounds maybe a little vague, but I think we're talking about waves propagating in a heterogeneous Earth, which is part of that heterogeneity is not just material properties, but the stress condition.
Is there anything you would like to say that I haven't asked you, or final thoughts you would like to add?
No, but I would maybe stress to people out there is that, so we've got 5 papers in this section. Are there any other topics that people would want to hear more about in this general area? You can't cover the whole topic with just 5 papers. So, they were, as I said, good papers, but still. But it'd be nice to hear from people of what else they would like to hear about.
That's great. And we welcome people's feedback, and I appreciate your time today, Doug, for speaking with me and sharing your work on this special section.
Okay, sure, thanks. And hopefully it'll be well read.
I hope so too, and I hope this will be well listened to as well and get people to read it even more.
Okay, great. Bye.
At seg.org/podcast, you will find the show notes and links to the May articles. Subscribers can read the full articles online, and abstracts are always free. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Your review helps others find the show. Subscribe to Seismic Sound Off on the podcast app of your choice to receive the latest episodes first. Seismic Sound Off is sponsored by the SEG Wiki, the place to find hundreds of biographies of influential geoscientists, open access tutorials, and ongoing translations of SEG's best-selling book, Robert Sheriff's Encyclopedic Dictionary. Type wiki.seg.org into your browser to visit the world's first online geophysics encyclopedia. Original music by Zach Bridges. This episode was produced by Mick Sweeney, Jennifer Crockett, and hosted, edited, and produced by me, Andrew Geary. Thank you to Steve Brown for his assistance. And thank you for listening. This is Seismic Sound Off, signaling off.